to talk about the Catholic press, social communications, and social media. First, what does the church mean by social communications, and how has that shaped the way the church engages with the world? The Vatican even has a whole department for this, the Pontifical Council for Social Communications, and it has issued over the years numerous documents on this topic. Second, how does social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest further the cause of social communications? Do social networking tools help us communicate better, or do they isolate us? How are the communities we create in social networks the same or different from the communities to which we belong in the church? And then the third thing I want to talk about is how we at the Catholic Review and Catholic Review Media, what are we doing to integrate as many means of social communications and social media as possible? How do we get from the Catholic Mirror from 180 years ago to today's multimedia publishing company? So let me start by telling you a story about a divorced woman several years ago. She was Catholic and her mom had been bugging her, she might have said nagging her, for several months about starting her annulment paperwork. For anyone who's been through that process or has known people going through that process, you know it can be painful and healing, but healing and painful. And she had just been dragging her feet about it. Like a lot of divorced Catholics, she'd been away from the church for a while, thinking that simply because she was divorced meant she couldn't participate in any of the sacraments. The Catholic paper that I edited at the time was running a 3-part series on divorced Catholics, trying to dispel some of the myths. It came at a really fortunate time in this woman's life. The woman went to pick up her mother for a dinner outing. Mom wasn't ready yet. So the daughter sat down on the couch, and on the coffee table was our newspaper with part 2 of this series. Happened to be the part about annulments. And so she looked down, saw it there, opened it up, read it. Goes to the jump page, finishes reading the article. Mom's still not ready yet. Hey Mom, do you have last week's paper? She goes back to read part 1 of this series. And the following week started her annulment process and began that healing that needed to be done. We never know when we're working on things in the Catholic press, what we're writing, whether it's going to touch somebody, how that's going to do that. But the serendipity of that really amazes me, and things like that happen all the time. Einstein's been quoted as saying that coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. And if it's just a coincidence that we published that series when that woman needed to read it most, then God is my assistant editor, or vice versa. But this is exactly the kind of thing that the Vatican's talking about, and was talking about nearly 50 years ago, when it released its decree on the means of social communication called Inter Mirifica. Even the title is great. It's Latin for among the wonderful things, and it's taken from the first words of the document. That's the way the Vatican traditionally names documents. It's taken from the first 2 words in Latin of the document. But the document begins, among the wonderful technological discoveries which men of talent, especially in the present era, have made with God's help, the Church welcomes and promotes with special interest those which have a most direct relation to men's mind and which have uncovered new avenues of communicating most readily news, views, and teachings of every sort. The most important of these inventions are those media which, such as the press, movies, radio, television, and the like, can, of their very nature, reach and influence not only individuals, but the very masses and the whole human society, and thus can rightly be called social communications. In Inter Mirifica, the Church talks about social communications being necessary for the good of humanity, though she warns that much harm can come from it too. You've seen movies, I'm sure, that lift up the human condition, like The Help, or the Martin Sheen Emilio Estevez movie, The Way. You've probably also seen The Hangover, parts 1 and 2, and Jackass, parts 1 and part 2 in 3D. Okay, so enough said. You can do really good, and you can do some harm. The key is that the Church wants professionals in the secular realm to use the means of social communications well, to lift up the human spirit and the dignity of humanity. The Church itself also uses these means to communicate its own message. because people have a right to be well-formed and well-informed. And the point the Vatican makes, and it's been emphasized time and again by popes from Paul VI through Benedict, is that the Church wouldn't be answering the call of Christ if it were not using all the means at its disposal. That decree on the means of social communications in 1963 never mentioned computers or the internet or iPads because they didn't exist. But we have to use every media, quote, insofar as they are necessary and useful. Last year, Bishop David Zubik of Pittsburgh addressed a convention of my colleagues in his home diocese. And he said, we can and must use every means of social communication available to us today. Television, radio, Facebook, Skype, and whatever has evolved since you and I began our meeting this morning, he told us, before adding, but I believe that it is incumbent on us as bishops and on us as church to maintain a vital Catholic print presence. He didn't mention Pinterest because it wasn't on anyone's radar at the conference just 9 months ago, and now it's the third highest ranked social media site after Facebook and Twitter. And that's one of the things he was talking about when he said, whatever has been invented since we started our meeting this morning. The Church cares about communications because that's where conversations are taking place. Communications are about how people connect to each other. It's how we form communities, it's how we impart information. When Blessed John Paul spoke to members of the communications industry in Los Angeles in 1987, he said that that meeting itself was vital because of the profound influence these people had on the world. He said, it is a fact that your smallest decisions can have global impact. He spoke that day about how the industry not only speaks to and about people, but makes it possible for people to communicate to each other. He spoke about satellites and their ability to help connect people more easily at that time. Now, at that time, cell phones were just becoming more readily available. The phone I used that week was about a foot tall and it weighed several pounds, but it connected me to my colleagues who were helping plan the Pope's visit to Phoenix. The Church's interest in communications is huge, but its investment or resources in this area do not match Hollywood's or Silicon Valley's. So while the Church does have its own boots on the ground in the Catholic press and other media, it relies on those in secular communications to make effective, that is, beneficial use of the means of social communications. So how well are we doing at this? How well are those in secular communications doing at this? I think it's an evolving process for all of us, and it's hard to keep up. From monks hand-copying scriptures, to Gutenberg, to movable type, to desktop publishing, to the iBreviary app on my iPhone, the pace is moving pretty fast these days. And it's important, though, to keep an eye on the principles that were outlined in the decree on social communications, and not always so much on the technology, on the how. So the principles, the why of what we do, and not specifics of how do we get it done, are really the things that are important to figure out. When we talk about social media, I think back to a case I heard of a few years ago of a young girl, 14 years old, in Central Florida, who had a couple of months in which she used more than 35,000 text messages in 1 month. In a slow month, she was in the range of about 15,000 messages. At one point, she wore out her phone. Her dad was very grateful for their unlimited text messaging. Now, at that time, in January 2009, the average number of texts for teens, 13 to 17, was about 1,700 or 1,800 texts per month. By December 2011, that had doubled to about 3,400 per month. 50 years ago, Inter Mirifica warned, those who make use of the media of communications, especially the young, should take steps to accustom themselves to moderation and self-control in their regard. They should, moreover, endeavor to deepen their understanding of what they see, hear, or read. So if somebody's sending 35,000 texts a month, that's not moderation. That's not self-control. That's not getting any sleep, I imagine. But how do you engage with people if you only use your thumbs? I mean, I'm not sure how that happens. Or text abbreviations like OMG or whatever secret language teenagers are using these days. In his message for World Communications Day in 2009, Pope Benedict spoke about new technologies, new relationships, promoting a culture of respect, dialogue, and friendship. He praised the benefits of the new social media for their ability to help people achieve the fundamental desire to communicate and relate to each other. He said, when we open ourselves to others, we are fulfilling our deepest need and becoming more fully human. But he warns, if the desire for virtual connectedness becomes obsessive, it may in fact function to isolate individuals from real social interaction, while also disrupting the patterns of rest, silence, and reflection that are necessary for healthy human development. That's why it's so important for you to gather as you're doing here at events like Theology on Tap. It's good to get together in person, real life. Social networks, whether they're online or in person, allow people to form communities. Now, whether that's a fan page on Facebook for a music group or a company you like. I'm a fan of Miss Twist Ice Cream Truck on Facebook. Maybe it's a school you went to. Maybe it's an alumni group on LinkedIn. Business specialty, like the Newspaper Professionals Group or the Catholic Business Network that I belong to on LinkedIn. Whatever that is, you are forming intentional communities. And those can be a great benefit at this time when we just really get stretched so thin. It seems that the more we become electronically connected on a daily basis, almost minute by minute really, the more that we seem to get disconnected. We get a lot of email, but maybe not enough face mail. Finding ways to connect to people, real people, can be a great comfort and can help us be more fully human, as Benedict said. They say you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your relatives. Well, the fact is that these days we pick our friends all the time. We friend people on Facebook, or we connect on LinkedIn, or we add them to a circle on Google+. Well, if you think about it, the Catholic Church and Facebook each claim about 1 billion members worldwide. And there's no way for you to intimately be connected to 1 billion people. It's just not going to happen. First of all, admittedly, in either of those groups, some are more active than others. There's some people who signed up for Facebook and never figured out how to do it, so they don't post a lot. I have a college friend who just never posts a whole lot on his wall. He's there, but he's not there. The same thing happens on Twitter. There are actually weeks that go by that I forget to post something. There's actually a Twitter user, @TheMime, check it out, who every few days just posts an ellipsis. He doesn't say anything. Of course, that's the gag. Okay, he's been doing it for years, though. But we all know people like that in our parishes. They may be Catholic by birth or registration, but they don't participate much, or they don't contribute much to the conversation. They may come to church on weekends, but we may never see them at classes or retreats, and they're not involved in ministry. Then there are the CEOs, the Christmas Easter onlys. And just as often, they're just not part of the conversation. So how do we connect to these people? Just as we often find ways to connect to people in our social network, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, whatever, we need to find ways to engage people in the church. So what can we do from that perspective? Invite a friend to join the choir. Ask somebody to join you at a retreat or a scripture study. Join a small faith community yourself. These are intentional communities, just as your circle of friends that you gather with for tailgating or an Orioles game or Theology on Tap is an intentional community. You determine how these people are connected to you. You put them in groups on Facebook. You put them in groups when you get together. You cannot connect to 1 billion people. But social networks can help you connect to a few dozen. And that's a good thing. Facebook and other social networks can help you by suggesting people you may know. They remind you of friends' birthdays. Remind you, hey, you ought to wish this person a happy birthday. I do it all the time. And people like that. Amazon keeps track of what you buy and recommends new things and recommends books and other things that you might like. It helps keep track of these kinds of things. You can't connect to a billion other Catholics. But small groups within the church can help you connect in ways that help us to be more fully human. Our parishes used to be small enough that we could know our fellow parishioners. But we can't do that anymore. As the trend goes, we're going to have larger parishes served by fewer priests. Or we're going to have a cluster of parishes served by a group of priests. That could be another whole topic for you to have Father Jay O'Connor and Father Jim Manning come and talk about that. But on top of that, we often don't stick to our local parish boundaries. We go where we're fed. If we like a more contemporary parish, we go here. If we like a more traditional parish, we go there. If we want a parish that has more social outreach, we go here. If we want one that focuses more on adoration or certain devotional practices, we go there. Whatever it is, you want to feel more welcome at this parish and you're not as welcome there, that's where you choose. You might keep shopping just until you find that. Whatever it is, you're going to wait until you find that community that makes you feel welcome, that makes you feel a part of that, and where you can get to be connected with people that you feel a part of. That's what's going to make it work. And even still, once you find that parish, you're going to want to find smaller groups within that to help you connect to people. Groups for moms, or dads, or young adults, or young marrieds, or people who want to study scripture. They're all available there. Find the kind of group and join it. Or find something that you're interested in and create the group. You can create groups on Facebook. You can create groups in your parish. It's all about creating communities and connecting to people. The church has been social networking for decades. Back in my parents' day, they called it the Women's Guild and the Holy Name Society and the Christian Family Movement. My mom and dad were parts of all of those groups. It gave them a great chance to get out individually and as a couple, and they made lifelong friends who were part of their life socially and as part of the faith journey. And that was long before they had computers to connect them. So this is where they became connected as part of the church. And the church was their foundation for that. That's where their network came in. You cannot connect to a billion people on Facebook or a billion people in the church, but you can connect to a few. As you do, keep this thought in mind from Pope Benedict's Communications Day message. When we find ourselves drawn toward other people, when we want to know more about them and make ourselves known to them, we are responding to God's call. A call that is imprinted in our nature as beings created in the image and likeness of God, the God of communication and communion. Now, when we talk about where we are with this as the Catholic press and the Catholic media, how do we figure all this out? Well, a few years ago, a bishop who was speaking to the Catholic Media Convention addressed this new media convergence. And he said, what does this mean to be holding an iPhone in one hand and the gospel in the other? How does the information in one device mesh with what has been handed down in our faith? And this is a vital role that only the Catholic media can fulfill. We kept these words in mind as we went through a strategic planning process at the Catholic Review and the Cathedral Foundation. It took us 18 months. And it was really a very widely consultative kind of process. We started with our board. We established a strategic planning committee. We invited a lot of people to be involved. We did surveys. We did all sorts of stuff. But the key there was we started with, excuse me, the woman who chaired the strategic planning committee. As we first sat down and said, where do we want to go with this? What do we want to learn? And she said, I get it now. I understand what you're trying to do. You want to maintain and enhance the rhythm of communications that is going on in the Archdiocese. I get it. And she's right. What we're trying to do is to try to keep the consistency that's going from the Catholic Mirror in the 1800s through the Baltimore Catholic Review that started in the early 1900s and it changed to the Catholic Review in 1936 to then what we've been doing in the past several years. Launch of a website, launch of an e-newsletter, we started dabbling in Twitter and Facebook and all those things. So she says, I understand, you want to maintain and enhance that rhythm of communication. So as we went along, we realized that our mission statement, our vision statement did not work with what we were doing. So we had to sit down and write a new vision and mission statement. Key words that came out of that, key phrase that came out of that was that our mission would be to inform, teach, inspire, and engage Catholics and other people of goodwill, not just in the Archdiocese of Baltimore, but really beyond those borders, because we knew we're reaching people past that with our internet site and with our other digital products. But really we want to start here and inform, teach, inspire, and engage. And with that, we also realized that the name, the Cathedral Foundation, didn't fit anymore with what we were doing. One, we're not a, first of all, people didn't realize what the Cathedral Foundation did and was. We're not connected to the cathedral. We're not really a philanthropic foundation. So we also decided at that time to dump the name Cathedral Foundation and create a new name. And so that's where we decided to embrace the flagship and go with Catholic Review Media as our new corporate name. And that still encompasses, obviously, the Catholic Review, but also our book publishing division, Cathedral Foundation Press, our print shop, Catholic Printing Services, and some of the other businesses that we do. We do custom publishing and all sorts of other things. So we said, how do we do that, and what do we move forward? But all those benchmarks still come back to inform, teach, inspire, and engage. So in January, right around the Feast of St. Francis de Sales, the patron saint of journalists, we launched several new products. We launched a whole new website, blew up the old one, and just said, we got to start all fresh. And there's more, it's much more interactive, there's new content, it's fresh daily. We have 11 blogs now, we had 3 or 4 before. We have a mommy blogger and a dad blogger and a deacon who's blogging, and he's also blogging from a business perspective. And we have a woman who's a parent of an adopted parent, and we have just, I mean, all sorts of, and that's just on the blog side. And then on, we have fresh content daily from Catholic News Service, and we have just all sorts of articles that are written only for the web, and they aren't going to ever appear in print. So we've just got, we've really become a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week news operation, which is bolstered by the fact that we've had a lot of newsy things happening since the January 26th, including our boss being made a cardinal and a new archbishop being appointed. So it's kept things running. We're going to be creating more frequent e-newsletters. Our site became tablet-friendly in January, and we're going to be developing a tablet app. We changed the frequency of the Catholic Review newspaper itself, and we changed the design. We completely got rid of the old design and completely redesigned this to make it fresher and more lively and a little bit more space and a little bit easier to read, but also changed the frequency of that to go every other week, so that that's, it, first of all, saved us a little bit of money, so we can put some of that into the digital products, but also makes it a little bit, helps us reach people in a different way. And then we launched, just a couple of weeks ago, a new product called Review in the Pew that is being test marketed in about a dozen parishes. And the idea with this is to reach people in that off week that we're not publishing the review, and just let people know, here's some things you might have missed, or here's some things that are coming up, and here's a few, and here's what's coming up on the web, and here's what's, here's a few calendar items. What our research had shown is that people are reading in different ways. They're no longer just reading the newspaper. They're reading on their phone. They're reading on a tablet. They're reading, you know, at work. They're reading on the coffee table. You know, I mean, at the kitchen table. And it was not just our research, but research that was backed up by research done at the Pew Center and by the Center for Research in the Apostolate at Georgetown, but showed that people want to read when they want to read it. So, and where they want to read it. So what we're trying to do with this is to reach multiple audiences on multiple platforms with multiple frequencies. And these approaches are going to reveal that for us. What we realized through the strategic planning process is that the Catholic Review is the content, not the platform that it's on. So our print subscribers will get free access to a digital edition. There's going to be an option for a digital-only subscription. And we're going to have an intense presence on Twitter and Facebook. We're also exploring Pinterest and anything else that comes along. What we found is so far that we are achieving our goals. The interesting thing is that stories that we promote on Facebook and Twitter get a lot of reaction. We're getting more comments on that. Our stories on the web are getting much more action than our previous website got. We're getting about twice the page views that we used to be getting. We're getting, interestingly enough, also twice the time on site. People are spending twice the time on our site than they used to spend. And part of that is that we have more video stories, more audio stories than we used to have. So again, that use of different kinds of media to engage people is really what's helping. And there's still value in the print edition being mailed out to people, because I think it helps to have something go into people's home and remind them that if you're Catholic, there's some information being sent to you. If you think about it, a print subscription mailed right to somebody's mailbox is the original push technology. So when we talk about e-newsletters and things like that being push technology on your phone, a print subscription delivered right to your home is also a different kind of push technology. Our good friend Cardinal John Foley, who died last year, was the head of the Pontifical Council for Social Communications. He had been the editor of the Catholic paper in Philadelphia for many years. He said recently, before he passed away, that the Catholic press continues to have a very important role to play in the work of the Church in North America. Like the crucifix above the bed in every Catholic home, a Catholic publication in the living room or the family room is a continuing reminder of our identity as Catholics. Our job at the Catholic Review, and really in all the Catholic press, is to figure out how do we maintain that presence in print, or on your tablet, or on your website, or on your iPhone, and that's our challenge as we move forward. We're trying to figure out how to use all of these new means of social communications and social networking to remain that way. We're not just a newspaper, we're changing the way we're delivering the news and information and engaging readers, and we're excited about the changes. So in conclusion, I hope you realize that the Church, with its insights on social communications, has been in step with the times, or even ahead of the times. Even if in practice it hasn't always done a good job of communicating as effectively as it ought to. At a workshop a couple of years ago for bishops and church communicators about new media, the facilitator tried to get a handle on the skill of the attendees in using email and other media. Most bishops in the room rated themselves very low. Some acknowledged that they were in the category of barely knowing how to open their email. But in the discussion, though, several of them admitted that the Church has to use all the means of social communications at its disposal, as Inter Mirifica called for in 1963. As one archbishop said, that's where the conversations are, that's where we have to be. In social media, the Church is catching up. Years ago, when many dioceses were struggling with the question of how to get into the game, the diocese I was working for was even trying to figure this out, whether to encourage all the parishes to get fax machines and get computers. One of the consultants we were working with advised us to look at the flow of technology as a fast-moving stream. He said you can try to jump in, and you'll just get caught up in the flow, and you'll never get ahead, and you might even drown. He said, or you can look at a point downstream and say, that's where I want to get in. And you can prepare yourself to get ready to get in at that point in the stream. That strategy worked. It continues to help. The problem right now is the stream is moving so fast that it's sometimes hard to figure out, well, that's where I want to get in, because by the time you get to that point, the stream has moved on. And so the folks at Facebook have realized that. Their motto is, if it's good enough, it's good enough. When they are building and developing software and they're developing a new app, when it's ready enough to go, they launch it. They fix it later. Maybe. If it doesn't, if it's good enough, they keep going with it. If it needs to be fixed later, they get rid of it and launch something else. But that's how fast it's flowing these days. The problem is that, unlike Facebook, we don't have unlimited resources. So in the church, so we don't have millions and billions of dollars. We don't have $1 billion to buy Instagram, and just run off and do that. We have to be really careful stewards of the technology efforts and the technology resources we have. That said, we are working toward using all the social media we can to share the gospel message and to engage people. We just have to do it better than we have been, and I think we're trying that. The challenge, I think, in front of us is, if you look at it, the official Vatican news page at news_VA_EN, if you want the English version, on Twitter has 85,000 followers. Not bad, but Ashton Kutcher has 10 million. Okay, but who's got the more relevant message? Whose message do people need to hear? At Catholic Review Media, we realize we can't solve all the world's problems. We can't even solve all the church's communication problems. We're not going to have 10 million followers on Facebook or Twitter, but we want to grow our presence there. So what does that look like? Do we need a critical mass of 5,000 or 10,000 followers to have the kind of community that's involved and engaged? We can't connect to 1 billion people. But how many can we connect to? How do we engage those people? How do we sustain that business model? Like many in our industry, we're still trying to answer those questions. In the meantime, we're excited about the changes we've made and the new products we've launched. And I hope if you haven't tried the Catholic Review or CatholicReview.org lately, that you will. We have some special offers tonight for those who are interested in subscribing. Shameless plug. I've worked in retail, I've mowed lawns at cemeteries, I've worked weekends for years at swap meet over the years. I studied 7 years for the priesthood. I got into this because I felt called to the Catholic press as a vocation, not just a job. At one point during my junior year in college, I went to my spiritual director, who we met with every week, and I said, I've realized I'm not called to be a priest. I'm called to be a layman, and he said, yeah, I've known that for 3 months. I've been waiting for you to figure it out. I said, why didn't you tell me? He said, it's like the Wizard of Oz. You have to realize it for yourselves. But that summer, I said, well, I want some kind of full-time ministry in the church, but I don't know what that is yet. I mean, I've got a major in English, minors in philosophy and theology. What can I do other than maybe be a youth minister? So, that summer I entered at the Chicago Catholic, and I went back to him in August, and I said, I found it. I'm going to be in the Catholic press. That's what I'm going to do. And sure enough, that's what I ended up doing. And because of that, I still believe that the Catholic press has a great part to tell the story of the people of God. And it's exciting for me to be working with all these wonderful things, as Intermerifica says. All these wonderful new things. Print, web, social media. All these things have the power to tell the story. And I'm glad to be able to do it. Thanks. Questions? Yes?
About probably 15 years ago, I was buying a house and I needed to buy a refrigerator and a stove. And my grandmother told me, go to Bulwickies, which is an appliance store on Eastern Avenue, for 2 reasons. They have the cheapest prices, and she was right about that, and they only advertise in the Catholic Review. So I was thinking about this, and I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about your business model and how much do you rely on advertising, and in the new way we all communicate online and everything, are businesses still willing to support, you're probably not getting money from Facebook and Twitter accounts, but from your website and how all that ties together?
You bet. Advertising brings us in about a third to 40% of our annual revenue. So we'd like it to be more, obviously. Like all newspapers, all media, we took a big hit in 2008, 2009. We're climbing back from that. It's coming back. And we are actually seeing a little bit better recovery than some of our secular colleagues. Part of that is that we didn't have as steep a drop, so we didn't drop as precipitously as they did, and so our return is not as bad. If you look at the Baltimore Sun, you'll see it's very thin these days. One of the things that we're looking at is that our growth on the web with our new website is tremendous. We have a new sales manager who came on board in October, and he has experience in selling the web. And so with the new website, we had most of our ad positions on the web sold out before we launched. And he has been involved in web launches before at Baltimore Sun and at Patch. And he said he's never gone into a web launch and sold most of the inventory before launch. So he was very encouraged by that. So we're looking at that. But again, still, web advertising is not paying the bills. And it isn't going to sustain us. And so that's part of what we're looking at is how else do we do that? I mean, how do we build enough of those numbers to get us to that point? So we still need, and the rest of our business model is based on, for the most part, parishes buying subscriptions for their members. And we're selling more advertising in the paper now than we were 10 months ago, 12 months ago, which is a good thing. Partly that's the economy's coming back, people are coming back in. Part of it is, I think, excitement about the new look and the new product. But how do we convince people that this is a viable market to buy? Sometimes we get people who just object and they say, well, I don't buy religious newspapers. And my response to that is usually, well, does that mean you don't want Catholics to come into your store? Is that what you're saying? So it's a tough thing all the time. When companies don't have a lot of money to spend, right now they have a lot of different choices on where to spend it. 25 years ago, 15 years ago, they had a lot fewer networks on TV to spend it on. And they had many fewer choices. Now they can go directly to a number of different websites and buy ads. I mean, shoot, who uses the My Coke rewards, things, the little codes you get in the bottom of the Coke can? They sell advertising on their site. Coke, for gosh sakes, which buys advertising and has more money than God. Well, God doesn't have any money, so everybody has more money than God. But I mean, they're selling advertising on their own site. So we're competing against everybody. And this is the thing. So it's a tough thing. I mean, and yet, I think we've got the people in place to help us do that. And we're always looking for new advertising. But these are the tough issues for us. And we're always looking for good advertising.
How many states is or how big is the Catholic Division?
We cover most of Maryland. The Archdiocese of Baltimore is everything except for the Eastern Shore, which is part of the Diocese of Wilmington, and then PG County and Montgomery County, which are part of the Archdiocese of Washington. So we cover everything else that's in Maryland. If you get to West Virginia, you've gone too far. But other than that, I mean, so we go all the way out to Garrett County and all of that. So if you go skiing out at Wisp and things like that, that's still in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. So we cover that whole area geographically, but we're finding actually that a lot of the people who are reading our website are coming from all over the country.
I know you said you're aiming to expand, the community presence on your different web initiatives, but what do you see now as far as the community forming?
But one of the things that we're seeing is that we're getting a lot more comments on our pages now, either on Facebook and we're getting some more reaction there. We want to actually, and this is one of the things we're still working with the company that designed the website, but we want to actually be able to enable comments on our website itself so that we can actually start building the community there. Because we think that's one of the parts that's been a real key of that mission statement is to engage people, and we want to be able to do that. We've always done that. It was called letters to the editor. But we want to do that in a way that's a little bit more real time. And so one of the things we're hoping to do is to do that. Some of the things we found out just in some very quick kinds of data is that we have different kinds of readership in different kinds of products. Our typical reader for the print newspaper tends to be female, tends to be older, 55 or older. When we did some quick studies on the web, we found that they tended to be male and they tended to be younger. And in fact, as you got into the younger cohorts, and it was a much smaller sample, so that if you're a statistician or a sociologist, these are probably not valid sample sizes. But As you got into the age cohorts, especially those under 35, were much more likely not to be a print subscriber and much more likely to be male. So that was really reaching a kind of community that we weren't reaching with the print edition. And that was encouraging to us to say, the more that we do in other kinds of things helps us reach the kinds of audiences that we're not reaching. And that's a helpful thing for us.
Yes, I always like to read, in my day they called it letters to the editor, you know, all the feedback.
Right.
A couple questions just got triggered. One is, you know, there's got to be some cutoff point where one of these letters, you're reading it and saying, this guy's a real nut. I'm not going to print it. I guess my question would be, what would be the criteria for something like that to be printable? And the second question is, how has that feedback changed and responded from the old format of letters to the editor?
We try, a lot of times when I look at a letter to the editor, I try not to say, well, gee, just because I disagree with it doesn't mean it gets to run.
Right.
You know, because that's not fair. I mean, we've had our say, and so it's kind of a chance to let the reader get a chance to get in there. So that's one. Now, if the letter's just plain flat out wrong,
Okay.
then they probably won't get a chance to run. If it's an ad hominem attack on somebody,
Okay.
that's not going to run.
Okay.
Now, if the letter's wrong but can be corrected with an editor's note because they otherwise make a valid and lucid point,
Rational. They're
yeah,
rational.
they're
Yeah.
otherwise fairly lucid. We'll let them do it.
Okay.
Now, this is not here in Baltimore, but years ago I got a letter to the editor from somebody who was complaining about the fact that we were focusing too much on nuclear war at the time. You know, nuclear weapons, and why were we focusing on nuclear weapons when nuclear weapons had never killed anybody, but abortion kills, X number of babies a day. And I wrote back to him and I said, perhaps you've forgotten Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And he wrote back to me and said, thank you for not publishing my letter and allowing me to make a fool of myself. So I mean, those kinds of things. But, so what we've done really, the difficulty that I see a lot of times in comments, and this is where you get into comments versus letters to the editor, is you can get a lot of comments that just, you really get some idiots out there, and they can. So right now our comments our comments on the website will be moderated, so they have to be seen and viewed before they go up. Now Facebook's not like that, but Facebook we can remove a comment if it's offensive or if it doesn't meet our standards, and we have comment standards in our info box on our Facebook page. But from there, and again, this is where we get to, if we have that critical mass of the community, if that becomes large enough, it becomes self-correcting. And you'll see this in other communities, on the USCCB's fan page, on Catholic Relief Services, on some of these others. If somebody posts a really horrendous comment, before somebody from the organization gets a chance to react to it, members of the community will react. And they'll say, you're just wrong. Or that's just, no, you misunderstand. The community will become self-correcting rather than the organization needing to correct.
Now this is on the internet.
This is on the internet.
So that's
right.
how it's expanded and changed.
And that's how, right, and that's
Yeah.
how, that's where the change comes in.
Like a blog, kind of.
Right, and that's where the change comes in on that side.
Gotcha.
So, there's one way to handle letters, and then there's another way to handle comments.
So you still get, what do they call those, the trollers,
Yeah.
the lurkers,
Yeah.
all these.
And the way we handle it for now is that the comments that'll be, coming on our website itself will be pre-moderated before they get posted. So they'll have to be approved before they go live. The ones on Facebook, because of the way Facebook works, they'll go live. If we find them horrendous, they can be deleted. We can, as administrators, delete them.
You try to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, again, if it gets good enough, if we get a large enough community, the community will help us police those as well.
Thank you.
I guess you talk about the relaunch of the newspaper and the website, and I'll confess, I'm a paying subscriber, but I'm not a fan of the website.
Okay.
I'm wondering what kind of feedback have you gotten? Am I in the majority or the minority?
We have, Most people like them both. The biggest complaint I have so far on the newspaper is the type is a little bit too small, and we're working on that. And actually what we found is that it's not the type that's too small, but it's the leading. It's the amount of space between the lines. So we're working on adjusting that. We're probably going to put together a focus group and get some more feedback. I spent 20 minutes on the phone with one woman who called and she said, I've been a reader of the Category Review for 50 years. I'm 71 years old. I love the paper. And there's just something I don't like about this new design. I can't figure out what it is. And we talked for 20 minutes. It was a great conversation. So we're going to probably bring her in for the focus group. But she said, and my neighbor is 80, and she feels the same way. So I was like, but it's great. It's good to get that feedback. For the most part, what we're hearing from people is that they love the new website. They love what we're doing with the newspaper. It's just the one big complaint was that some people are having a little bit of trouble reading it. One complaint that we got 3 or 4 complaints in the first week was they couldn't find, why did we take out Father Joe Brayner's column? And the problem wasn't that we took it out, it's just we changed the name. His column had been called View from the Pew, and we changed it to Wit and Wisdom because we kind of couldn't figure out why a priest was writing a View from the Pew, and his books are all called Wit and Wisdom of Father Joe, so we changed it to Wit and Wisdom. And that was the only reason. They couldn't find it because we changed the name. So